Okay, good evening. My name is Rachel. We're going to be refuting our opponent's claim that the minimum wage should be raised from $7.25 to $10 an hour. Their significance claim that the current minimum wage of $7.25 is not enough to sustain a single person in any state in the U.S. We find that this is not completely accurate. The minimum wage, as they stated, was introduced by FDR in 1938, set at 25 cents, and we actually found differing research on that, the current currency that equates to today from the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that that would be equal to $4 per hour today, which is well below the current federal minimum wage. And it was originally introduced as a means of moving the country out of the Great Depression. Historians also speculate that the federal minimum wage had racist intentions. As stated by the National Center for Policy Analysis, the 1931 Davis-Boren Act requiring prevailing wages on federally assisted construction projects were supported by the idea that it would keep contractors from using cheap colored labor to underpay contractors using white labor. So the purpose of the minimum wage was originally to stabilize the post-depression economy and protect the workers and the labor force. The minimum wage was designed to create a minimum standard of living to protect health and well-being of employees, and that's from Cornell Law School. So basically what we're stating here is that the minimum wage was not this idealistic setup to say, like, here's your 25 cents an hour, sir, go live this lavish, beautiful life. Not that that's what it should be today either, but it wasn't meant to be where you're staying. It's meant to be an entry-level starting point. And furthermore, of the people who work minimum wage jobs, a high percentage of them are only one income of a household. Very few people actually are a single person sustaining a full household on a minimum wage job. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, only 20.8% of all minimum wage workers are family heads or spouses working full-time. 30.8% are children, and so under age 18. And 32.2% are young Americans enrolled in school. The popular belief that minimum wage workers are poor adults, meaning 25 years old or older, working full-time and trying to raise a family is largely untrue. Just 4.7% match that description. Indeed, many minimum wage workers live in families with incomes well above the poverty level. So basically that's stating that although yes, if I myself lived alone and made the federal minimum wage, maybe it wouldn't sustain a household, but only 4.7% of all those making the federal minimum wage actually live that reality. Moving on to their solvency, that the minimum wage should go from $7.25 to $10 an hour. While we do agree that an increase in minimum wage could be beneficial, the affirmative fails to provide reasoning for the exact value that they have stated. Additionally, this rise must be reached at a conservative rate to go from no change in 9 years, which is the last time that the federal minimum wage was risen, to that big of a leap is just not feasible. The economy needs to be able to keep up with the rate of rise in the minimum wage to avoid inflation. I actually interviewed the CEO of the business I work for. It's a small business, and he said that businesses can only control labor and cost of goods in terms of overhead, so that rent, utilities, things like that are concrete and cannot be changed by the business itself. The only things they can control are labor and cost of goods. Minimum wage would raise both. If the minimum wage raises at a faster rate than the economy can keep up with, businesses will suffer, which in turn affects employment. So if a business has a steady level of sales, doesn't go up, doesn't go down, no matter what, they have to pay rent and they have to pay electricity and all of these things. If the federal minimum wage were risen, they would have to increase the pay they're giving to their employees. And if their vendors are doing the same thing, their vendors are going to have to raise prices in order to recover that cost. So that also increases the cost of goods for that business, which in turn ends up hurting the employees as well as the employer. And then another thing that the opponent stated about Oklahoma. So the state minimum wage is actually $7.25 in Oklahoma. However, tipped employees are considered exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act. So therefore, we think that the change needs to be made in that law rather than the federal minimum wage. Because if the minimum wage were to rise to above $7.25, that exemption would still exist. So they would still be making under federal minimum wage under this law. So the legislation needs to change, not the federal minimum wage, in order to impact the state of Oklahoma. Additionally, they are trying to state that raising the federal minimum wage is the only way to reduce poverty. However, a greater issue at hand is the creation of more jobs. So if people who already have jobs get a raise, that doesn't do anything to help the millions of Americans who are unemployed. And the issue of automation plays into that, because if more jobs are lost due to automation, that's even fewer people who are even making minimum wage at all. So the issue of minimum wage doesn't even affect them because they're not making any wage at all. That was 7 minutes.